Summer here in West Michigan, maybe seeing brown patches come across your lawn and you're wondering what's going on. Is my grass dead? Discoloration? Lack of water? Heat stress? Maybe it's disease? There's a bunch of options it could be. Today we're gonna go over those and what you can do about them. Let's dive in. What's up everybody? It's Jordan with Lawn Doctor. We're talking about brown patches in your lawn. Let's go take a look at some and see what they are. The first one we're talking about is heat stress. What is heat stress? In the summer, we really have these high temps. A lot of times we're in a drought as well and the lawn is not getting the adequate water it needs. Due to those high temperatures, this grass will begin to kind of go dormant from the top down. That way it's going to be looking a tannish, a yellowish, hay or straw colored, and it's going to feel very crisp to the touch too. Another thing you are going to be able to tell is when you step on it, that grass is going to feel crunchy. It's not going to pop back up, which kind of proves that there's no moisture in the blade of that grass. And a lot of times the lawn is not always dead, even though it looks dead. It's going dormant to protect itself. And once we get cooler temps, once we get water, this lawn should pop back up. That is not always the case though. Sometimes with extreme heat and drought stress, the lawn can actually die off in certain areas and not come back. Most of the time though, we do see lawns kind of bounce back again in those fall cooler temperatures with water. These ones go hand in hand. So we had heat stress, now we have drought stress. Basically the same thing, but are two different causes. So it's the heat and then it's lack of water. And again, this lawn's very dry here, it's brittle. A lot of the grass blades are breaking off. It doesn't have the adequate water in those grass blades to maintain its posture. That way, when I step on it, it's not gonna pop back up, it's gonna lay down flat, and it's not gonna look very good. A lot of times we see heat and drought stress again in the summer here in West Michigan. It also depends on the environment of the lawn itself. Right here, full sun yard right here, we got a down slope as well. And this lawn gets beat with sun, no irrigation. Those areas tend to be the most beat up, fragile, and so a lot of times you're gonna see stress in those areas. If we move over to this area, towards the end of the hill, that gets more shade over there, you can see it's much more green. It doesn't get beat up as much by the sun. It probably gets a little bit of water runoff, and the shade also protects it a lot from the sun. So the third reason you may have brown spots or brown areas is improper watering. Summer watering is very important. You may be watering too light, too frequent, or at the wrong times. We typically recommend every other day of watering, about 30 to 45 minutes a zone, or you want 1 inch of water with natural rainfall per week, whatever that includes. That gives us our deep and frequent watering. Therefore, when we're watering deeper, the grass roots are kind of diving more and they're going to get that water and they're not going to be towards the surface. If you were doing frequent watering, like 2 times a day for let's say 5 minutes, you're kind of teaching those soil roots to kind of remain at the surface. They're going to become weak, they're going to be stressed more easily, and they're going to look worse than if you're watering deep. And along with the improper watering, that can create drought stress again because you're watering light. Those soil roots are going to stay at the surface, causing that lawn to look stressed out way quicker than a lawn that is watered deeper and infrequently. A big one that we've come across here in the area too is, especially if you have irrigation, people assume if I have irrigation, my lawn should look green. That is not always the case. We've actually kind of looked into the irrigation. You want something called matched precipitation on your irrigation heads. What that means is that a lot of the heads, how they're lined up, they're matching precipitation with the cross paths of the other head. Therefore, you're getting proper coverage of that irrigation system. And so we want to make sure that you're looking at your irrigation heads because they all have a little number or a dial on them, or maybe it's a specific rotor type on an edge or in the middle of the lawn. You want to make sure that those are all matched together and they're working in sync with each other, because if they're off, that's going to also be able to tell you're going to have brown areas or areas that don't look as good as the other parts of the lawn. As we get into summer here a little more, maybe later summer, we're going to begin to see grub damage. That's going to be those grubs coming to the surface. They're going to be eating those soil roots, and therefore it's going to kind of turn a tan colorish color and it's going to rip up like you're lifting up carpet. With grubs, you also may notice other animals kind of digging in, skunks, possums, birds. They could be creating damage on the top, and then the grubs are kind of creating that damage on the bottom. And so you want to make sure you don't have grubs, especially going into the fall time when we're going to be looking towards seeding and things like that. You're going to know if you have grubs if you pull up that grass, and they're going to be small, white, C-shaped larvae, and they have little pinchers on the very front for their mouthpieces. The next thing that can cause brown spots is fungus. In the summer, a lot of lawns are very susceptible to fungus. A big one we see is brown patch, another one is red thread, another one is dollar spot. Those are all very prevalent in the summer. Brown patch specifically creates kind of brown, irregular patches that kind of unfold randomly throughout the lawn. Brown patch is most common during warm, humid weather, especially when that grass stays wet for extended periods of time. That's also why proper watering or improper watering is very important too, because you want to be watering in those very early morning hours, so between like 4 a.m. to like 9 a.m., but you never want to water at night. You don't want that lawn susceptible to disease. If it stays wet all night long or you water like after 5 p.m., that lawn's going to be prone to disease. Excessive nitrogen and poor air circulation can also cause this disease to kind of move and spread throughout your lawn, so make sure you're on an annual fertilizer plan, and also make sure you're aerating or making sure there's circulation in that area. We have another one, and that's going to be dog urine spots. Dog urine spots usually look like small circular patches of turf that's usually laid down pretty good, surrounded by larger dark green grass around it. Dog urine contains concentrated nitrogen and salts, therefore it's very burn potential for your lawn, and that's why it kind of kills it. Especially female dogs tend to have a very higher concentration than males. That's why you see a lot of those patches where they urinate on the lawn. Watering down the area shortly after the dog urinated can help, but a lot of times, especially if they go in the same spot, you're going to see damage and extended damage for a long period of time because that grass won't be able to recover. Repeated damage may require seeding or sod for long-term long-term solutions. So we went through all the different ways that you can have brown spots or brown patches in your lawn, but how can you identify them? Well, there's a couple things you can look at onto how identifier to point you in the direction of what's happening. Large dry areas that are in the full sun exposed all day can point towards heat stress. Times of drought or poor sprinkler coverage can usually lead to drought stress. Grass that lifts easily could be grubs or another type of insect damage. Circular or regular patches throughout the lawn during humid and dry conditions along by improper watering can be fungal issues. And then very small concentrated areas on the lawn with very small spots can point towards dog urine spots. So if you end up having a disease, make sure you clearly identify that disease before treating it, because depending on the disease, brown patch, red thread, or dollar spot, those can all have different treatment plans occasionally, and that's why you want to identify it. Usually you can identify a disease by looking at the grass blade, and that grass blade will point you towards one of those three. You also want to know what's happening too, because you don't want to over fertilize or under fertilize or do weed control if it's not needed, and that can also potentially harm the grass as well. So you want to be sure what the issue is. If you're unsure about your lawn, a professional can always help. You want to be able to send pictures, look them up online, and you always want to know what's happening before you come up with a treatment or an action plan. If we can help you out in any way, send us a picture, ask us a question. We'd love to help you guys figure out what's going on with your lawn. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, Jordan with Lawn Doctor. See you next time.